John Wooden is quoted as saying, "True success in collegiate athletics isn't measured by wins or losses, but the character we build along the way. Integrity, respect, and teamwork are the foundation of not only great athletes, but also great individuals." Let's talk about the foundation of character on today's episode of the Playing with a Purpose podcast. All right, welcome to the Playing with a Purpose podcast, where we explore topics related to the moral development of collegiate athletes and young people as it pertains to character, responsibility, and purpose. I'm your host, Matt Barker, and today I'm excited to have a man that knows a lot about the NAIA Champions of Character, Mr. Rob Miller, with me on today's episode, and I'm excited to talk to him. Rob, thanks for being with me today.
Well, thanks, Matt, for having me. I'm looking forward to our discussion and where it leads.
Absolutely. So we were talking a little bit before the show here, just to kind of get a little bit of background information about you. You've worked a lot of different areas within the NAIA coaching, and you have something called proactive coaching that you're really actively participating in. Sounds like you do a lot of speaking engagements, over 150, I think you said, throughout the country. Tell us a little bit about yourself, just so our listeners know a little bit about who you are and your involvement with the Champions of Character initiative and some of the other things that you're involved with.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate. I grew up in Michigan in a very small town there, and that led to being an athlete playing 4 different sports, had great coaches. Went on and played NAIA basketball with another great coach, and then ended up getting into coaching. And high school, I coached boys and girls basketball, coached boys and girls track and field, but then got into college. That's where I spent most of my coaching years, was assistant and head coach at an NAIA school, which then led to me getting my master's at Michigan State and got into sports administration through the NCCAA. And then in 2000, which I'm sure we'll come back to, is when I got to the NAI national office the first time. And I got asked very bluntly to start a character program. We had no idea what it was going to be. So we'll get to that a little bit later.
Yeah.
But then I was at the national office for 8 years, from 2000 to 2008. Left there to be part of proactive coaching with Bruce Brown, who also was involved in the Champions of Character program. And over the last 16 years, I work at high schools and colleges, from NAI schools to D1 schools all across the country. I had the chance to speak outside the country in 6 different countries. And then the nice thing is I've also stayed involved by being an NAI conference commissioner, retired from that. Now I'm back at the NAI national office a few hours a week while I'm doing the proactive coaching. So as my wife says, and I love this, you just coach a different team every day.
That's right. You just work with different people. You're not with the same team. You're just working with different individuals. Absolutely. I love that. And one of the things I was going to mention to you too, this was something you start doing research on different things. I did my dissertation on the moral development of collegiate athletes. That's what my whole dissertation was about, working specifically with athletes here at Freed-Hardeman. And it was just cool to me to see that back when the NAIA Champions of Character initiative started back in the year 2000, 25 years ago, you were one of the ones that was instrumental in that. Kind of cool to put a face to a name of some of these things that I've seen throughout the research I've done. So I really appreciate all the work you've done with that. One of the things I found at Freed-Hardeman was that athletes at NAIA schools do look at things a little differently. And I think that's attributed to the Champions of Character initiative and some of those things that hopefully these athletic programs across the country are doing. So just wanted to say I appreciate your work on that. With the Champions of Character initiative specifically, I want to focus a little bit on that today. This podcast, we talk a lot about how not just the X's and O's of coaching, and you've seen kind of both sides of this with coaching and working with the Champions of Character initiative. When this was implemented 25 years ago, what was kind of the overall goal they were wanting to achieve with that program?
Great way to start that. Our CEO at the time was a guy by the name of Steve Baker. And Steve Baker came out of professional. He played Division I baseball for a year, and then got drafted and went into the Major League Baseball. And then he actually ended up working for Major League Baseball International. Came to the NAI, and he was seeing something I think we were all seeing 25 years ago, and that is sports changing. And we started. And I think changing is kind of we always have to look at that within the parameters of. Was sport changing? Yeah, but you know what else was changing? Access to media.
Absolutely. Social
media.
And
so a lot of things maybe weren't changing as much as we thought, but they were getting far more impressions and far more distributions. And it became this thing that people started seeing. We maybe have a problem here. So Steve's whole premise about this was, how can we change the culture of sport? That's what he'd say. We'd sit around the table. How can we change the culture of sport? And he wanted to get to a point, and we in proactive coaching we phrase it this way, but it's what he was trying to say. We just didn't say it this way 25
Yeah.
years ago. We want the NAI product to be so different it's noticeable, and when you notice it, it's appealing.
Mm.
Because how many times can you look at it and say, is that really different than any place else? Or how many times have you seen it and it's different, noticeable, and unappealing, and you go, we don't want anything to do with that.
Yeah.
And so how do we do this? That's how it started. And I think the other key thing was, I guess, two other key things. First was 25 years ago, no one was really talking about the culture of sport.
Right.
From an organizational standpoint, you had a group called Character Counts by Michael Josephson,
Right.
who you probably
I've done some research with him as well. Yeah.
And Michael was a attorney who he loved to get people in the cross section, okay, just like an attorney would,
Right.
okay. So he created awareness of the issue. At the youth sport level, you had what was called Positive Coaching Alliance, which started in Stanford. It's still around. It's a different organization than it was 25 years ago. But Jim Thompson was bringing it to that level. And then we started coming along and talking about it more at the college level.
Yeah.
Here's the other thing I think Steve did, which was very smart. It was his idea. It was the national office's idea. But let's get involved with coaches. Let's get involved with commissioners. Let's get involved with ADs. Let's get involved with presidents.
Yeah.
And that's how we started this thing. Is it wasn't started at one level. It was started to say, how can we make an impact? So that's why it was started, was to be different, to do something to improve the student athlete experience. And here's the other thing I would say we wanted it to be. And this is kind of what when Steve came to me and said, we want to start this program, will you run it? My response was, and I'm not going to say these were my words 25 years ago, but it's what I was thinking. Yes, but can't be philosophical. It's got to be application-based.
Yeah.
Coaches and athletes do not live in a philosophical world. They live in an application-based world.
You're right.
Okay? Yeah. I always say, you got to remember, a coach, and I'm a basketball coach, I'll use that analogy. I got 10 minutes at halftime to make adjustments, not 5-year strategic plan.
Yeah.
I got to get it done. That's where we have to live. So that's kind of the premise behind why we got it going and how we got it going.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so thinking about these, we mentioned with the Champions of Character initiative, came up with these core values: integrity, respect, responsibility, sportsmanship, servant leadership. That's the 5, that we reinforce. What are some ways maybe that since this started in 2000 to today where you've seen that really play out, maybe some success stories that you've seen, maybe with certain programs or just in general with the way it's shifted from first year up until now?
I'll give you one, and I'll give the pros and the cons on it, okay, on both of these. The pros, and I'll put it this way, and I'll use one specific example, though I could probably use 1,000. You know this because of your research, and this is based on Dr. Sharon Stoll, who I know you've run
University of Idaho.
Yep. Okay? Yep. Sport does not teach character.
Right.
Too many people think sports teaches character. Just being in the activity doesn't. You have to be intentional about it. So the example I'll give, and again, I could repeat this with 1,000 different people we've worked with. Bob Wilson, who's a retired NAI coach and AD out at Vanguard University in Southern California, put it this way. They went from saying, we do this unintentionally, to we got to start doing this intentionally, to creating a Champions of Character course for all student athletes to go through when they arrived on campus, to having it become what they called Gold Pride. They were the Lions, so Pride, right? Gold Pride, that it wasn't just a freshman class. It was something that transformed over their 4 years as an athlete.
Yeah.
That to me is the success story, where it's coming and it started when you came in and it lasted till you ended, and it was intentional. And that's how you teach character. It's just not going to come because you throw them on a field to play soccer or something like that. It's got to be intentional. That is the biggest success story I think we found. On the con side, and I don't think this is Champions of Character related, this is culturally related.
Yeah.
I think a lot of character building has turned into community service.
Yeah.
And community service is important and needed, but I kind of refer to that as citizenship, and we all need to be great citizens. So the servant leadership part needs to be more than community service.
Right.
It needs to be building up your teammates, being there for your teammates, going the extra mile for other teams on your campus, not just going out and reading or doing something for younger kids, which is part of it, but it's not all of it.
Yeah. And so it kind of leads me to my next question, thinking about the different ways that the Champions of Character initiative is implemented. Okay. And I think a big part of that is through the coaching. They are the ones maybe organizing some of the things that are done. And I think you're right in saying a lot of times when you think about, well, we're going to go out and just do something in the community, and that's going to count as our community service for that day. And I think it is much more than that. It's this overall identity that you develop as a result of, and again, it's intentional. It's something that you are purposeful about and that you intend to do, and it's something that becomes a part of your life, not just an activity that you're doing. So what are some ways maybe that you have seen that it's implemented maybe more successfully? Is it through coaches, teammates, programs, or is it kind of a combination of all these different ways? What are some ways that are the best way to implement it, you think?
I think it's the combination thereof. Your number one influencers are your coaches, right? I mean, they're the ones that have all the time with the athletes. So if they're not holding to the higher standard, why do the kids have to hold to the high standard?
Right.
If they're not teaching character through sport, why is it that important? Okay. If they're not, so that's where it starts. But then I do think it's also from athlete to athlete. I think it's, that junior, senior has to mentor that freshman, especially when they come in. And sometimes we have to understand that freshman's coming in with a higher standard than we might have. And we have to be, the culture of sport sometimes. Here comes the freshman, pay your dues.
Yeah.
Well, pay your dues, but also learn from them. If they can make us better, let's be better. And I will mention this. One way we believe that we get coaches buy-in, and I think this is where my proactive partner, Bruce Brown, who was with me at the NAI, got coaches at the beginning to really embrace Champions of Character. 2 reasons. It's the right thing to do. We're in educational athletics. But also it's second. We describe character to coaches as this: making great decisions on effort and behavior.
Yeah.
And the better decisions you make on effort and behavior, the more productive your team will be. The more productive your team will be, the better they'll perform, which gives you a better chance for success.
Yeah.
We don't just believe it's the right thing, which is the most important thing, but it also leads to more success and competitiveness. Why wouldn't we want to do that? Why wouldn't we want to teach that as educators?
Absolutely. And so thinking about this, I kind of thought of this as we were talking, the proactive coaching, it sounds like you're a pretty busy guy. It sounds like you have a lot of engagements throughout the year. So it does seem like a lot of teams and, programs are taking this seriously. Tell me a little bit about how you got started with proactive coaching and the response that you've received from the different schools and programs and different places that you've been. Tell me the experience with that and maybe some of the results that you've seen from proactive coaching and how that's, give a little plug here for proactive coaching and talk about that. Sounds like really
First of all,
awesome.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's always a good thing because
Yeah.
we do word of mouth. Well, let's go back. When I got to the NAIA in 2000, we started Champions of Character. And I will mention this. I think this is important, is the name Champions of Character. It actually came from our president's assistant. Her name was Carol Putnam. And Carol was just fantastic. She's retired now in Arkansas. And one day we're sitting there and I was just bouncing things off of her one day because she was just wisdom. And I went through and I said, what do you think about the word champion? And she said, let's look it up in the dictionary. Well, there's 2 definitions under champion in the dictionary. The first is to advocate or defend a position. The second is to win.
Mm.
Well, that's what we're trying to do. Advocate and defend a position by winning through character.
Yeah.
And so that's how the name came to be. But then the second thing was, okay, how are we going to get this? And so I had a friend up in Seattle who knew this guy by the name of Bruce Brown. And he just retired from coaching at the high school level and junior college level. He said, she told me he's speaking up here. You need to come hear him. So I did and knew right away, this is what we were looking for, application-based character coaching.
Yeah.
So we hired Bruce at the NAI, and he and I worked there for 8 years. But at that point, we were getting a lot of requests to speak other places. So we branched out under his umbrella of proactive coaching in 2008, which he was already doing. And then we still work obviously with many NAI schools, but that led into a lot of speaking nationally at every level, including the NAI.
Yeah.
It's fun because I would say this: you usually go to one of 2 places when we're out speaking. You go to people who are really good that are always looking for an edge, or you go into people who are in crisis because some bad event just happened.
Yeah.
You know where you don't go? Average.
Yeah. Right in the middle. Yeah.
They don't care. They're okay being average. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to those type of places. And then it's all over the board because I think you're seeing, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to train coaches to be better in intentional coaching? We do that at high schools and colleges. We do working with student athletes, especially in the last 10 years, as the student athlete advisory committees, or the SALT teams as they're related to, have taken off. How do we really train young people to lead? Because that's the number one thing I've heard since '08. We don't have any leaders anymore.
Yeah.
And my response is, what are you doing to train them? We work with parents. We try to get programs from, as I phrase it, we have way too many t-shirt slogans and too few action statements.
Yeah.
Now, the t-shirt slogan's at 30,000 feet. We need it. But you better have goals and objectives, which are at 3,000 feet. You better have tactics, which are at 300 feet. And you better have action statements, which are at 3 feet. And great athletic programs live at 3 feet.
Yeah.
So we do that. Success stories, we could go all over the place, from high school programs to great NAI programs. Probably the ones we work with at D1 are interesting because you work with the program, not necessarily the school. You know, if you're working at a smaller college, you're working with the athletic department. If you're working at as high school, you're working with the athletic department for the most part. But at the bigger levels, you're working with individual programs.
Yeah.
And I would say our biggest success story is probably Vanderbilt baseball.
Okay.
And I don't do a lot with them. Bruce does. Him and Coach Corbin have a great relationship, and they work a lot together. So that's been a very good success story. I've had a great chance to work with UCF softball over the years, when Coach Ball Malone was at Boise State and then down there, University of Washington softball. So we've had that chance. I'll throw one other thing out there, though, which I think is really interesting for our listeners. Over the last 10 years, 25%, 30% of our business has become cheer and dance. And one, it's taken off, right, as a sport.
Mm-hmm.
But two, they last all year. And you know what they realized with their teams that last 7, 8, 9 months? You can't hide problems. You got to deal with them.
You got to deal. You can't just do it
You
next
can't
season.
hide it. Can't throw a Band-Aid on it.
Yeah.
We got a long season. So we spent a lot of time both with high school and college dance and cheer programs. And it's fun because you've learned what kind of athletes those people are, and they're athletes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so with this proactive coaching, when you're doing this is very interesting to me. So I probably have a few other questions about this. When you're meeting with these different teams and programs, are you spending a lot of time working with the coaches where you're kind of helping them figure out ways to maybe work with their athletes? Or is it a combination of working with athletes and teaching those athletes, like we talked about, those mentorship and those different ways that they can build character and then pass it on to others? Or is it a combination of both of those?
We want a combination of both, if at all possible. There's sometimes it's a one-time shot if you're doing a coaching clinic or something like that. You know, you're going in, you're spending they hired you to come do an in-service for their coaches. Okay, that's a 3-hour one-time shot. But if we're going to work with them, and for me, about 70% of my business is returns to the same places. We want to work with both the coaches and the leaders and the team. And the reason is, I think it comes back to a great Pat Summitt quote. The greatest weapon we have on any team is ownership. And so it can't be, I got to do this because the coach tells me I have to do it. It has to be because the coach is working with me because they know this will help me become better, raise the ceiling. So I want to do this.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to create that ownership within the team because we believe that raises the ceiling.
Yeah. And I think coaches a lot of times set the standard for that a lot. I know just in recent days, it seems like my Twitter feed and Facebook feed is filled with certain, coaches or whatever it is doing things that maybe are not what they're really supposed to do. And the team and the players see that, right? And they're the standard that a lot of times is what says how the program is. We call it a lot of times in different sports that we play or see is the culture of that program. And a lot of time that starts at the top. So I was curious to know how much of that is, when you're working with the coaches and things like that.
And I think I'd add to that. And part of that is the size of your team, right?
Yeah.
So if it's a large team, if it's a big old football team or track team, that's something, it's going to be 80 to 100 people. Now you're probably working with the coach and the team leaders. If it's a smaller team, and just say like golf, tennis, they're around 10 or 12, now you can work with the whole team at once.
Yeah.
And then when you get those in between, you got to figure out how you're going to work with them.
Right.
But it is the coach, no doubt, it has to be who the coach is, but it also has to be who the athletes want to be. And so it's that combination thereof. And, we tell you this to every team. good, bad, or indifferent, every team stands for something.
It's just what do you want to be known
want
by?
your team to stand for?
Right.
Right.
So with the NAIA, I think the NAIA, and the reason that, my entire career has been at a school that's part of the NAIA, and I think one of the unique aspects of the NAIA is you have athletes that we have some athletes that'll go to professional careers, but a lot of them, they're not. They're going to go on to careers and other things besides athletics. Unlike, NCAA, you have a lot of them that go to professional careers in athletics. So what are some of the things that you've seen that the NAIA Champions of Character initiative and some of those other things we do within the NAIA has prepared these athletes for jobs outside of school, those that don't go into professional careers, how they impact their communities, how they impact the jobs, the coworkers that they interact with, and just the overall perception that you've seen student athletes that have been through the NAIA specifically with the Champions of Character program?
Well, it really is interesting you said that, because I just read an article that made me feel good about where we're at. And it wasn't in the article, but it related to it. And I'll speak about that in a second. I think it does a couple things. First of all, is the data shows if you're a student athlete, you budget your time better. You got a higher GPA and a higher.
You got a good head start on life already just by being an athlete.
You're already ahead, and so I think that's the starting point. We've already started with a little edge. How can we increase that edge? And I think what we're trying to do in those things that you mentioned, let's define respect. Because let's face it, if I walked on your campus today even, and you guys do it better than most, okay, right? I mean, I said that to you before. It's one of my favorite places is your institution.
Yeah.
But if I walked down and grabbed all your athletes and had them sit in a room and write a definition around respect, how many different definitions would I have?
Probably everybody would have a different answer for sure, yeah.
That's right. And some of it in today's culture isn't probably what you and I grew up with, which doesn't make it bad. It's just different. You and I grew up with more of respect is what can I give, where today's definition is what can I get.
Yeah.
And so we got to get on the same page. So I think that's the first thing. You learn to work together to form what your culture is. And when you could put an athlete in a position in a workforce, when they're walking in on day one, and they understand what culture means, and they can look around and see it and understand it and impact it, they're way ahead of people who have never been on a team before and intentionally taught character and culture is an important thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's already, now you've taken that edge we talked about as a student and bumped it up even more. The one I think we still are working on, but I think we still have an advantage because of Champions of Character, is I believe what Champions of Character also allows you to do is work with each other and understand we're not always going to agree, but we can move forward together.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of young people today, when they enter the workforce, don't understand when a boss is looking at you and they're riding you hard.
Yeah.
Okay. What's it for? Where a person that's come through the character, Champions of Character, as we always say, and I've probably done this more with Proactive than I did at Champions of Character, but we always say this: you have to learn to listen. When somebody's correcting you, take that as a compliment. Now, coaches, it can come with urgency. It can come with angst, but it better never demean. Okay. So, but you get in the workforce, you know what? Somebody's going to come in with some urgency and make it on you and demean you a little bit.
Yeah.
How do we learn how to take that as a compliment? That's what respect is. That's what accountability is. That's what, leadership is. Servant leadership. I'm going to put myself here so I can grow and make our team better. So I think we give them those life skills. But we, again, have to get them more than words. We got to give them action statements that allow them to succeed. And I want to come back to that article real quick. It's written by a D1 coach, and she's really good, and she does a great job with culture. But she said this about athletes, and she said it in general, and I made the comment, no, that's a D1 issue, not necessarily a small college issue. Maybe somewhat to D2, but it's this. Because of the portal, because of NIL, and how long our kids are sitting around, and the fact they can be in school for 6, 7, 8 years now.
Yeah.
They really aren't as good as employees as they used to be.
Yeah.
And I get that point. But I would also say this. You're talking about kids that are in the portal that are making a lot of money. And as much as it dominates our conversation about sports, it's a low percentage of our athletes, even at D1. You got to tell me that swimmer and that cross-country runner who are up every morning at 5 o'clock putting their mileage in aren't dedicated and know how to work hard?
Yeah.
No, they do. And so does the football player and the basketball player and
Yeah.
the hockey. They get it too. It's just they're in a different, right now, they trying to navigate something that's never been navigated before.
Yeah, and it's tough for every program, every coach that is dealing with that as well. And when thinking about this balance, I think that the word balance is important to think about when we're talking about, well, we need to have that athletic performance. We need to have success as a team, athletically. We also need to balance that with, we need to be good people. We need to have a good culture at our school. So what advice would you give, and this might be something you speak on with your proactive coaching, what advice do you give to student athletes and coaches even who might be struggling with balancing wanting to do well athletically, but also staying true to those core values that we talk about a lot too? What's a good balance in the way we can do that?
I think the first thing is to remind coaches that you're here at a school that's under the Champions of Character program in the NAIA. You could have one of the top 10 programs in the Directors Cup in the NAIA. But take a look at this. How many of your kids have gone on and made their career playing sport? Okay. Okay. Hopefully a few. Okay. I think we all wish that, hope for a
Yeah,
few. But how many have gone on to been on teams the rest of their life? And the answer is 100%.
yeah,
Every kid that leaves our program is going to be family, church, business, community. Our goal is to make them better teammates for life. Okay.
yeah,
So that's the first perspective, because I'm a coach, you're a coach. We can get really narrow. Okay. I want to win and I can get really narrow.
yeah,
Just remember, one, we got to focus on who they're going to be 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. You quoted Wooden to start this thing,
yeah.
right? But one of Wooden's greatest quotes is when he was asked, right, how's this year's team? I'll tell you in 30 years
Mm. Who they become. Yeah,
who they become, right? So that's one of our whole goals, is to keep a focus, remind them this is long term, not just today's game, but it's long term. But I would also add to what we've already talked about. You need to be intentional. So look long term, be intentional. And remember this, you are a lifelong mentor for these people. So don't stop coaching them. I gave this analogy the other day in a talk. I was watching a high school basketball game. It was out of 15, 20-point game in the fourth quarter. And they cleared their benches and both coaches sat down and watched the kids play. And I thought to myself, how sad is that?
yeah,
They should be coaching as hard in the last 5 minutes with the subs as they were in the first 5 minutes. Same is true for our kids when they leave our program. You won't see them as much, you won't talk to them as much, but you should still be coaching them and coaching them hard. For the athlete, I think we always have to remember this, to me, and I think we're seeing this in our culture of, in as what we're seeing with anxiety,
oh
okay,
yeah,
that's out there. And I'm not a mental health expert at all, but I think we have to make sure they have to know, and coaches better know this, their value to us as a person is not tied to the results of their performance.
Mm.
Their playing time might be results to
Yeah,
may be tied to their performance, okay?
right,
But not their value to us as a person is not tied to that.
yeah,
You're so much more. And then the second part is, learning to fail is a good thing, and you're going to fail. And we have to teach that, and they have to understand that. Failure is part of life, and I'd much rather have you get out of your comfort zone and fail hard than stay in your comfort zone and never experience it.
Mm. Yeah. And I really liked what you said earlier. It kind of stuck with me. I wrote it down actually. When you said the culture, a lot of times throughout, when this Champions of Character program was implemented back 25 years ago, the mentality a lot of times of not only athletes, student athletes, coaches as well. You mentioned respect used to be something you give, and now it's something you get. And it kind of makes me think about how society in general, our culture, has shifted from the year 2000 up until now in 2025, even at a smaller college level. But what are some ways you've seen the program maybe evolve a little bit to meet the needs of student athletes and coaches?
I think the two biggest ways it evolved, and this didn't include me on either one, because the first one has to do with tech, and I'm not a tech person.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was already gone when they did this, but I thought it was excellent. They were able to, now I'm always a believer in this, just being a teacher. I think in-person education is always better than online education. That's just me.
Yeah.
Okay. Saying that, I think they've done a really good job of providing resources for coaches online. So, and you know why that's good? Sometimes I can't wait for that person to get here a month from now. I need my answer tomorrow. They
Yeah.
can get online. I mean, we could do that in a lot of ways. Go to YouTube, go to whatever. But if you want specific issues, there is a resource center for Champions of Character online. I like that. But probably the one I've liked the most over the last 4, 5, 6 years is I think they've really, and I'm not sure we did as good a job with this early on in the program. I think we're focused on coaches is more in the early going.
Yeah.
What I really like what they're doing right now is they are listening to the student athlete. And they're engaged. And the NAI, for those that don't know, started an association of student athletes and a council of student athletes, put them in, has a voice in governance. And they've used that association of student athletes to get feedback on the Champions Character program.
Yeah.
I love that. I just think that coming back to my ownership, Sarah, and who's at the NAI national office now, has given them some ownership in the process. And that's been good. That has been really good.
Yeah. So what message would you like to leave if you had to leave a message? And again, I'm sure you probably mention a lot of this with the different teams that you work with through your speaking engagements, talking about proactive coaching. But what message would you leave to athletes and coaches regarding the importance of character, integrity, all those different core values? Any final thoughts you'd like to share on that?
Yeah, I'll just share two. One is one we used way back when with Champions of Character, and this was a Bruce Brownism, as I refer them to. And I think this resonated at our schools a lot. One athlete of character improves a team. One team of character improves a school. One school of character improves a community. And if you take all the NAI schools and they improve in their community through Champions of Character, we make a difference in the world.
Yeah.
That's the first thing I would implement on. And I think we have some great schools under the NAI Champions of Character umbrella that do that. The second thing I would imply is in a world with a bunch of noise, and what I mean by that is, I mentioned earlier, when we started, there was 3 groups talking about character and culture in sport primarily. Now, there's a few individuals, like Dr. Stoll and a few, but there's just 3 basic groups out there. There might have been more, but those are the 3 making the difference. There's now probably 300 out there, okay? Make sure you find the ones that hold true, that have depth. Character is about depth. It's not about a branding campaign. It's about, too many people want to talk the game but not show the game. We need to get in depth with the game. If you really want to be a character-driven coach, if you really want to be a character-driven athlete, stop talking about it and put it into action.
Yeah. Great thoughts. I can't wait to listen back to this episode because some of these quotes that you gave, the last 2 specifically, I didn't have a chance to write down. So I'm going to listen back, and these are things I could have used in my dissertation. I wish I would have talked to you sooner. These have been great things to include in there. But Rob, I really appreciate.
You can redo it and get me a doctor.
I could get you. There you go. You know, we'll just add you on to that. Yeah, a lot of the stuff that you did with Champions of Character was really beneficial in my dissertation. So you maybe deserve one as well with that. So, Rob, I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a very busy man, and you have a lot of different things going on. Super thankful that you make this a priority in your life. I know with coaching and things like that.
Thank you. And if I could say one more thing.
Yeah.
As a young coach, I wasn't doing this because I was tied up with what I call it. We have to get away from schemes and teach skills as X and O's. We get away from the schemes and teach the skills. Same thing with character. Get away from the schemes, teach the skills. It'll make you a better coach and educator.
Awesome. All right, Rob, I really appreciate it, taking the time to being with me today, and really excited to have people like you and that I can talk to about this. And you don't find a lot of people wanting to talk about this. I've been trying to find places to talk about my dissertation results, and there's just not a lot of places that you can find to do that. And so a podcast I thought was a good way to do that, and finding people like you to talk to that can really shed a lot of information out on Champions of Character, integrity, and all that. It's really been great, and it's been great to talk to you today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us for this week's episode of the Playing with a Purpose podcast. Special thanks again to Rob Miller for being my guest this week. Be sure to check out this episode and future episodes on Spotify or anywhere you listen to podcasts. This podcast is also proud to partner with the Ministry League Podcast Network. You can also find the Playing with Purpose podcast on the Freed-Hardeman University Athletics Champions of Character website at gofhulions.com/champions of character and on the NAIA Champions of Character website at naia.org/champions of character. We hope you'll join us for our next episode as we talk with Freed-Hardeman softball coach Todd Humphrey on the topic of leadership through sports. And remember, winning isn't just about the scoreboard, it's about the character we build along the way. We'll see you next time on the Playing with a Purpose podcast.